So yeah, welcome. It's me, Talk Photography, and we're doing Fab and Family, of course. So I've got a variety of different images. So when I do the sessions, unlike when we have other photographers, when I do the sessions, I look at it more as a training element, not just about 8 images. Whereas when we have guest photographers who come onto our Talk Photography, we're always talking about 8 of their images and things, really. So this is your chance to use and abuse me with as much information as you want and things, really. So anyway, I suppose there is the first question to ask is, what is a family portrait? Now, wow, it's completely unique, I think, for every photographer, amateur photographer, just person with a smart device, whatever it is, the family portrait is going to be completely different in meaning to every one of us. As a pro photographer, for all of my career, and mainly spending it in the world of people photography, there are 3 main things that mean family photography to me. 1, 2 is going to be pose, and 3 is going to be what I feel is the most important part out of any family portrait, no matter what, is expression, the right expression for the scenario of the image and things, really. And as far as when you're kind of just doing it for a bit of fun, you know, I was out with my grandkids on the weekend. I was taking some photographs of them and things, really. I'm not taking loads of kit along. I'm just taking a camera, and I've got a little reflector that I kind of tuck in the kind of camera little bag that I carry around with me as well, but just in case, you know. But if I'm going down the beach, I'm not going to take a reflector, or am I? You know, it'll fit in a bag. And when I talk about reflector, it's the little ones rather than the big ones. But on the other hand, what I can do is use probably one of the most powerful devices that anybody has in the world of photography today is a smart device. And as far as the family is concerned, for me, it means a gathering. It's putting people together for either a special occasion or a celebration, or just because of. Now, as a family photographer, you'd think they'd be queuing out of the door to actually have their photographs done. I can absolutely guarantee you that we had to fight nail and tongue and foot, or whatever it would be, to actually drag families through our door. In fact, Kodak once did an analysis throughout the whole of the UK. They spent quite a lot of money analysing the percentage of families that had actually had a professional family portrait taken with it. And we were on about, I think it was something like 8% of the population, which is just minuscule, really minuscule in the kind of the whole world, as it were. Now, some of you could go, well, my gosh, we've got a business ready to be made here, because only 8% of people, families, I should say, have ever had a professional family taken. And you can go, well, I'm going to make a killing. And others of you will go, well, if only 8% have ever had their photograph taken as a family, what's the point? It's too hard a work to get them through the door. And basically, I think about the first scenario is that if we can get them through our door, we're going to make a killing. But obviously, we know it's going to be hard to get them through our door, so we need to market hard. And today, even through my business group and things, really, it's still hard to actually get a family. And because they're very busy diaries, the easiest way to get a family through our door, if we just talk business for 1 second, is when they're really looking at a celebration or a big event. You know, for us, the most lucrative was probably when kids were just going off, or one of them was just going off to university, and the start of the empty nester was going to actually come about. And so as far as the age group is concerned, you know, the great thing about families, whether you're a newborn photographer, a family photographer, and even today, if you're a dog photographer, you know, some people don't have families, as in kids. It doesn't mean they haven't got a family, because their pets are there actually families, and that is a genre by itself. So when we start to kind of break things down and we understand, you know, why I do family photography, well, I love it. It's a bit like a wedding, but you have control. Yeah. As far as that, you know, you're not in like 200 miles an hour like you are on a wedding, and you're putting all these groups together, you're making them as simple as you can. But what you do with family portraiture is kind of perfect your skill sets in so many ways. You know, if I'm down the beach, I'm more of a candid photographer, obviously. However, if the backlight is great, and my grandson will sit on a rock, or he's fiddling around with something, and then all of a sudden I go, you know, look to me, or whatever I do, I'm in control a little bit, and I get an image. So there's that kind of candid. But as a studio photographer, or a photographer that photographed in clients' homes, pretty much everything was a controlled environment. It was controlled with lighting, I controlled the pose, and I controlled the expression. Why did I want to control these things? Well, the first thing would be the light is the what sculpts the body, thins the body, makes somebody look better, you know. And when you're trying to charge somebody for a photograph, they want to look better than they are in real life. That's obviously why everybody goes to the dentist to whiten their teeth, or to get them straightened, or whatever it'll be. In the same way, somebody has a tummy tuck, or they go for, you know, Botox or whatever it is. They want to look different. They want to look better. You know, we're all getting older, and you know, we want to look better, even if we don't admit it, perhaps, and things really. So as far as the light is concerned, my fundamental element is to make sure I'm in that basic control, so I can make sure that everybody is lit evenly, and by doing that, I can create the shadow easily across the whole group. It doesn't matter what size it is. And then I have a little bit of that control in actually separating them away from the background. So in a classic studio environment, like perhaps we're looking at here, we would revert to a 3 or a 4 light setup to make it easy. One big soft box as our light to light the whole group, a fill light behind camera position set at a 1.5 or a 1 2/3 less, a separation light on the background, so pointing towards the background, which will be hidden behind the subjects, and then a separation light coming in from one side or the other to kind of highlight their hair and so on with it, so they fully separate them away from the background. Then we start to look at the pose, and the pose is really designed to kind of allow the jigsaw to fit. And I've got some more kind of ideas for you as we go through some different images to exaggerate the difference in the pose. But really what we're looking at is the simplicity of the pose in kind of making shapes, making sure that eyes are on different levels, and as well as kind of trying to hide the grumpy granddad, or the kind of the person that is dominating because they're so big in height or size, whatever it is. So we can kind of really help them fit more within the group. It's a bit like if we put a black glove on a white background. You cannot help but look at the black glove. In the same way as if we looked at a white snowball in a black hole, you would look at the snowball more than anything else. So it's the contrast of color and size and light that actually kind of draws the eye. And what we're trying to do with pose is make sure that everybody is almost unique, but they kind of blend together as a group in some way. Why? Because we don't want one to stand up more than the other, unless it's like a commercial shoot where we want exactly that. We want one person in the group to actually stand away from the others and things. So as far as the pose is concerned, it's easier to start when they're stood up than it is when you kind of bring gravity down, because if you've ever seen me naked, you'll know that gravity has a big hold on my belly. As soon as I sit down, I basically feel fuller and fatter, plus my whole gravity body kind of comes to light. Whereas if I'm stood up, you know, gravity is allowed to actually kind of drop a little bit more, and there's nothing to actually hold it back up and things. So I've given you a horrible picture, but I apologize for that. But that's what everybody thinks of when they're having the photograph done. Plus, again, I don't know what to do with my hands. You know, how many times have we heard a client say, so what do we do with the hands? What do we do? I don't know what to do. Oh my God, I'm so frightened of having the photograph done. What shall I do? And so by kind of not explaining to the client exactly what to do, we almost create a a little bit of an issue for ourselves to begin with, because we're not helping the client be better, look better, and feel more relaxed. And that's what a good pose will do, in fact, is not make the client feel like they got a rod up their butt, but in fact, it'll make them feel like they naturally sit in a similar position, and they can sit here for a couple of minutes without discomfort. When we start to pose, we'll always start from a seniority or the biggest person in the group, and then we'll pose around them. We'll very rarely start with a child and build the group around them, because they're the ones who are going to fidget the most and the quickest and want to get out of there the fastest. So we're always better to actually bring them in last, and so on with it. As far as the expression is concerned, it is the most important part. And even though if you're going to go for the silent, solemn kind of image like we've got with the girls here, but a bit more fashionista kind of thing, we're still going to have some images where we're kind of taking the mickey out of them a little bit, or they're taking the mickey out of me, and we're getting a little bit of expression. What I don't want is stupid expressions, because they don't sell and things really. Okay, so those are kind of the three main points we're going to look at during the session. We'll kind of be coming back and referring to those time and time again and things. Okay, so let's look at the kind of the kit to begin with, no matter what. So as far as if I was working in a studio environment, I would usually opt for the likes of a medium zoom lens. A 24-105 is a perfect lens for a family. But I always want to work on the longest length of the lens, no matter what, because I don't want the wide angle part of the lens to actually see too much off the background, especially with like a 3-meter seamless paper. Whereas if you're too close to the subjects, because you're using the wide angle part of the lens, you're going to have to repair a lot of the edges of the photograph or crop a lot of the pixels off. So the 24-105 is a great starter lens, and that's my kind of group lens without a doubt. I also use like a 50 and an 85 when I'm in studio. The 70-200 lens tends to be for family photography, more of my location lens, where kind of space isn't a problem, whereas in studio spaces it usually is. And if I was using the 70-200 lens inside, I'm probably closer to a 70mm all the time than I am anything else. So I would tend to actually opt for, as I said, like the 24-105, no matter what, especially if I'm working in a client's home. It's a great all-around lens, but I will swap the lens to the 50 and the 85 as soon as I start to work in smaller groups. Basic shutter speed, usually around about 125th of a second if I'm using flash. I kind of try and get to about 125th of a second as well if I'm using ambient light as a minimum. Why? Because, yeah, I'm getting older. I do have the shakes, and plus it kind of freezes clients naturally. But obviously a running child needs something like 2,000th of a second to kind of freeze them, or panning or whatever it is. And of course, if we pan, we blur everybody else. So again, control is going to be something that we talk about quite a bit in things really. ISO 100, I always go for the minimum ISO, the natural ISO on the camera, which in my case is 100 ISO, but I'm not afraid to push it up to around about 400 or more, even if I've got to get to the working aperture. But because I'm actively trying to sell big wall art, what I don't want to do is add too much grain or too much noise into the image. And the modern day cameras are quite exceptional today, unless you kind of screw your exposure up and you've kind of used you screwed the exposure up, you're trying to lighten it up, and you've used a high ISO. It's when you lighten things up in the likes of post-production, the ugly parts of the image, the blue channel in other words, are the ones that is going to really start to show up all the ugly noise and so on with it. I meter manual pretty much all the time. I very rarely allow a camera to have an automation in any way, not even an automation in ISO, an automation in f-stop. I want everything to be controlled by me. And perhaps that's an old-fashioned thing, but you know, control is key to guarantee the results. And you know, you get to feel when the cloud comes across the sun a little bit, and you'll know that basically the exposure is going to change, and it takes 2 seconds to actually raise your meter up, take a reading, and then adjust your likes of ISO or shutter speed to kind of bring you back into the correct exposure. Because really what I want is a perfect exposure run of images all the time, instead of kind of having to fix every little image in the likes of the post-production. I mean, today I've just been finishing a load of commercial images, and yeah, there is a little tweak in every single one of those photographs because they are deemed to be perfect to the client. So I need to make sure they are absolutely perfect, as it were. Whereas, when I get back from a shoot, I want to be able to download straight away. I know the exposures are correct. Pretty much the color balance is going to be quick fixed, as far as either with a gray card or something gray within an image, so I can color correct. And then all I've got to do is basically apply a preset of kind of my black point and contrast level to give me the look and the feel to the image that I really want. And then once that's done, basically I'll just have to look at a series of images together and kind of fix them as a batch. So in other words, if the cloud did come in, I was out on location a little bit, and I've kind of going through a few photographs, and I don't want to miss it, and that kind of clouds come in, and I've lost about a third of a stop, then I can select this series of few images and correct them instead of trying to do each one at a time. Consistency is key. So as far as my aperture is concerned, if I'm photographing just say 1 or 2 people, I will pretty much opt for the likes of 85mm lens, 50mm lens, or the 105 of the lens, and I'll be shooting around about the f4 level. Very rarely do I shoot 2 people with an aperture less than f4. I do like a sharp nose, a sharp eye, and then I'm focusing on the eye. But by the time it gets to the back of the ear on an adult, pretty much this focus has now gone. So anything within about an inch in front of a nose and an inch behind the ear is basically soft in every way. So as far as f4 is concerned, if I can get the heads on the same plane, as it were, I can pretty much use f4 without any trouble. If I'm in doubt, I'll move it up to 5/6. I know I've got that extra stop of depth of field, still focusing in on the eye of the main subject, and then I basically can actually work with them without any trouble. So small group, I would say like mum and dad and 2 small kids, and pretty much they're on the same plane. When I work in family groups, bigger groups, or perhaps more commercial groups, I need to really work on f8, 11, and if it's a very big group, I need to work on f16. If it's a commercial group, I tend to work on f16 anyway, because I need to actually have that depth of field. But for family photography, f8 for the group photography would be my kind of working aperture. If you said, what am I on? It'd pretty much be 125th of a second f8. And pretty much you'll know how I'm working then. As soon as you see me swap a lens down to a prime lens, I'm then actually working more onto a f4 kind of scenario at that point. Okay, so there's our basic settings. As far as when do I shoot families are concerned, if I'm photographing in studio, any time of day, of course, 3 backgrounds, 1 seamless white as a rule. For those of you who've watched old films on the Academy when we were in the church studios, I had a big white wall and I had a vinyl floor in that used to just lap up the edge. This is the scene you're seeing now. And basically I had 2 reflector dishes to light the wall. And then I had basically the big softbox to my left or my right hand side, and that would actually light across the whole big group. So we feather the light across the whole group. We don't point it at them. If we point it out at them, one part of the group or the other is going to be darker than the other. If we feather and we feather it correctly, pretty much both ends of the group, even though the light might only be on the left, if we feather the light correctly, one end of the group to the other is going to be within half a stop. Okay. I like 3 backgrounds during the session. That gives me 3 different looks, 3 different styles as well. And I usually change the main light source by the time I get to the 3rd part of the session, which I deem to be the creative or the different part. I don't want everything to be lit the same because I'm trying to create a stylized kind of series of images and so on. And I know kind of some of the images that I showed right at the beginning, when I said, what is family photography, you might look at it and go, that's not me. That's not what I like. That's not what I do. I'm okay with that. Okay. What we're trying to do is always be loyal to ourselves. And if we are loyal to ourselves, our clients will know what to expect. So if you always kind of show images to in your portfolio, on your website, whatever it is, clients are pretty much expecting to see something similar during the course of your session, not necessarily the same. If you're based in the UK or in America or Hong Kong, you'll know the word adventure portraits. And I was lucky to be invited by the originator of Veg, Brian Glover Smith, to be one of the trainers prior to the franchise launch. And I was given a small group of experienced portrait photographers, all had their own studios, but they weren't under a franchise umbrella at the time. And basically, I was just asked by Brian to actually show them what I do and basically shoot like I do and so on with it. And the one session I took in all my high key family, and we were shooting high key family. And high key, remember, is this kind of white and light scenery or set. And basically, they all kind of went, "We ain't doing that, Mark." And I went, "Why?" He said, "Because it's technically difficult with film." And remember, this is in the film years. This is, 95 to 97, I think it was. And basically, it was like, "It's too difficult with film, Mark." I said, "Well, look, this is what I've been asked to kind of show you guys to what I do. So we're going to follow it through in the training, if that's okay." Obviously, the likes of recovery of information or kind of removing things on edges or backgrounds or cleaning up whites is much easier in the digital world and very, very quick to fix and things really. But as far as in the studio is concerned, I want this high key beginning and I want a dramatic end. So as far as the strip boxes are concerned, the strip boxes are usually used without grids on the front to light the background, a white background, so it doesn't flare back onto the customer or minimizes the flare back. But because I was trying to light a very, very big wall in the church studio, I needed big reflector dishes to actually spread the light quicker and more and so on with it and things really. I'm sure some of you have seen some of those films. So when I'm working on location, in a similar styling that I would shoot in studio with it, except now it's different because I'm working, it could be on a beach, it could be in a woodland, it could be in an architecture, it depends on what the client wants. But I'm usually looking for a backlight because that is my separation light. And straight away, clients will struggle to do images with backlight because the light's going to come into their lens of their camera or their smart device and so on with it. So instantly, if I allow the sun to come from behind, it means we know that they're not going to be gazing into the harsh sunlight and they're not going to be lit in a high contrast image or high contrast light. So by them looking, so with the light behind them and the sun pointing in towards the camera lens as I shoot, as it were, then basically I just need to reflect some of the sunlight back with either a white or a sunlight reflector, which is a strips of silver or silver gold with white. I can bounce some of the lighting back into the group to obviously give me the contrast back instead of a muddy light. When I'm working on location in a wood, it's good to note that we kind of talk about the first tree in the wood. So in other words, if you go underneath the canopy of the tree too much, you can see I've just put my kind of hands above my head from my kind of light that lights me in these. And if I kind of move too far away, the light becomes mushy on my face, it becomes too dark. And so that creates a problem as such. But the backlight is the big tip, and kind of staying just past the first canopy of the tree, on the edge of the tree, as it were, of that first tree in the wood. And if I want to create more dramatic images in the third part of my location shoot, I will revert to off-camera flash, or on very sunny days, I'll use hot reflectors, silvers, golds, solids to actually bounce the light directly back into the subject, which can be a little bit uncomfortable for them. But the more you work, the more you shoot in that way, you pretty much get used to knowing how to actually put the reflector, kind of switching it on and off so the client's not going to be blinded whilst you're getting ready for the shoot and things. The one thing I would say as well, which I haven't got on the kit part, is that when I'm working in a studio or I'm working on location with very large groups, I will usually work on a tripod of some kind. a studio stand if I was in studio and there's one available, or a tripod. This is so I can kind of revisit the group quickly to just finesse. I'm not a toucher. What do I mean by that? There are photographers who have to go up and manhandle the client in a position, and that is because they can't explain to the client how to turn their body, how to move a foot, where to place their hand, and they need to go up and do it. And I absolutely hate it. A sweaty beast like me, when I'm working hard, the last thing I would want is for me to go up and touch anybody, and the last thing that they want is me to go up and touch them. So I basically worked on a thing called remote control posing, that from behind the camera position, that I can direct everybody in turn, even if I don't know their names. Yeah. I'll kind of will know their names because I have a stick-it note on the back of my camera, tip of the day, with their names and everything else with it. But then I'll direct them each side. So, you know, Molly, can you just turn your shoulders towards this direction for me? And I'll point, yes, instead of right or left or whatever it is. Molly, can you move your left foot? She knows what is her left foot, yeah, and can just push it out towards this way a little bit more. So I'm giving very precise instructions. Okay, just tilt the head a little bit more. So all the things I'm doing, but because I've got a tripod with the camera in position, it's very quick for me to actually kind of finesse without looking through the camera all the time. And I know everything is sharp, and basically the clients are in the composition that I want. The background can be, you know, the second part of the shoot can be as simple as switching the illumination off what is the white walls. You can see I've removed the vinyl off the floor here. And basically then moving the light either against the wall, which will give us this huge gradient light. But because it's so close to the wall, if I had all the family against the wall in this shot, the people on the left-hand side, near the light source, in other words, would be lighter than the people on the right-hand side, which would be nearer to the softbox on this side. Now, don't get confused. Just because this softbox is on this light, yeah, it probably isn't going to touch them. It'd just be for the top of their heads or whatever it'd be. But if I wanted to use the feather of the light in exactly the same way, but just with this kind of source of light, the position where you're seeing the main light source now, the octa, would have to move up the room, so away from the wall, yes, up towards the camera position by around about 1 foot to 1.5 foot. Once it's in that place, basically the edge of the reflector closest to the subject would still be around about 6 inches to 1 foot in front of them. And it would be washing across them in exactly the same way that I would feather the big group, like I explained before. But by doing that, it means that evenness to the group once more is maintained, and I'm not going to get a light end and a dark end of the group. When I start to work in the third part of the shoot, even if it was as simple as one light, and it's still the octa, I basically will now point it direct at the subject. So for part 1 of the shoot, it's feathered across them. Part 2 of the shoot, it's feathered across them. And then part 3 of the shoot, if I'm not going to take the softbox off and change its shape and style and softness in some way, then I need to change its directness, which will instantly create a difference in contrast. But as soon as we start to point the light at the subject, if there's multiple the subjects in the scene, there will be a gradation in exposure across the group. Otherwise, you're going to bring it so far back that it basically just kind of is bland across the whole image, and that's not what I want. So as far as when is concerned, studio, I can do it after school, I can do it weekends and half terms and everything else, but I've got to be available for when those clients are available. And again, as far as half terms are concerned, you're either going to be filling them up with kids off school or you're going to be filling them up with family. But as a rule, usually only one parent is off during half terms, not both of them. And if they are both off, they're usually going away. So for me, I find that the most successful time is always going to be a weekend if we could put in the families together. And the same would be, in fact, if I'm working on location, the slight difference would be I tend to work with families in the afternoon rather than the AM on location. I just found that the kind of the nearing the 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, depends on the age group. Younger kids have got to be shot earlier on in the day. With the kind of the teenagers and so on, we can shoot later on in the day, especially in summer months and things, really. How long is a shoot? I usually allow 60 minutes. If I'm on location, it's about 90 minutes because we will be walking from one location to another. But as far as the studio turnaround time, I'll usually allow 90 minutes between shoots because I need to reset the studio, of course, between the different shoots no matter what. And if I'm working on location, probably I'd only shoot with 2 clients in an afternoon when I'm working on location. So again, a different kind of what is needed. Plus, I need time to do my post-session pre-selling, as it were. Posing versus Canid. Yeah, for me, it's quicker to do a great pose or a great stylized image. With the experience that I've got after all these years of being a people photographer, I see things and adjust things very fast. Whereas I fully understand that when you get going in photography, there's so much to think of that you kind of miss the little things. Look, don't punish yourself, all right? Just get better every single shoot you do something better each time that you do it. And by the end of like a dozen or a couple of dozen shoots, you're a different photographer, I promise you. But by setting a standard set of images to create or recreate, you'll find your flow will become a lot quicker and you'll be identifying problems with feet or hands or heads or expressions or even lighting. So I like to go through a set series of groupings that I can duplicate and just tweak a little bit between the different families because of obviously the different ages as well as the shapes and the sizes and so on with it. Everyone is going to be in a set place depending on their size and their dominance, like I touched on at the beginning. So somebody like me, I'm 6 foot now. I've shrunk. Yeah, I used to boast about being 6'1", you know, blah blah blah. But I've shrunk. I'm 6 foot now. It's probably because of the weight. But I would tend to go towards the back of the group. Yes, why? Because if I'm at the front of the group, I'm going to dominate it, and everybody else is going to be much smaller than me. And the closer I am to the camera position, the bigger I'm going to become. So if you think about it, as a rule, anybody who is of a bigger size, whether it's in height or physicality, try and either move them towards the back or towards the backward part of the group, and always trying to have somebody in front of them to disguise their body shape just a little bit more as well. But once you can basically identify how it kind of fits together, you can then quickly reorganize the group to create much more variety and kind of speed along the session and things, really. I do love to do candid images. So in fact, I will do some shots, even in a studio environment, when they're kind of in a change around. And with the kids, I usually kind of put the adults in a position. We kind of get all the kind of the great images and expressions and so on with it. And then just as I'm on the verge of the kids getting a little bit of bored doing the same thing, when I say kids, it's pretty much anybody below a teen is concerned. But we can get them to do run around, so they can kind of run around the group, run to me, run away, run towards each other, blah, blah, blah. They can interact in some way. And it's a quick way for me to break everything down, have a bit of thinking power. Don't worry if the photographs aren't brilliant, because I really know that they're going to be buying, you know, the other images that we're going to be creating during the shoot. But it's an easy way for me to bring it through. When I'm working on location, I still work in a controlled way. Excuse me. Why? Because if I just allow family to do what they want, what's going to happen? The people that we want at the back of the group are not necessarily at the back of the group. The people who we want at the front of the group are the people who have now hid themselves at the back of the group. So I need to think about this, even though I'm going to be allowing them to perhaps a little freestyling on the floor, on the wall, or whatever they're doing, or running off the sofa or jumping off it, whatever it's going to be. But in that second part of the session, I can allow the candid to happen, whether I'm in studio or on location. But in the first part, I would always recommend control. If you can keep control of the group, you will find it's quicker, you'll get more consistency of shot, you will get greater expressions, and you'll be able to tweak those series of group-ins that you're learning to put into your everyday photography. So in the session flow, I try and start off with the biggest group first. The biggest pain in my butt is going to be first. I'm fully aware, especially when you're working with three babies, like you can see here, that it ain't going to be an easy thing, yeah? And you're going to have to make sure you're shooting those kids ASAP to make sure you get those photographs no matter what, as soon as you can with it. And okay, the great thing about digital nowadays, like we've lost this little chap over on the right-hand side here, who's looking towards his grandma or his nan or whatever it is. But that the easy thing is that we can kind of just clone the similar shot where he's looking at me, so we can kind of actually then kind of swap them in the post-production, and all I ever show to the client then is the best of the best. If I've seen this child is looking towards the rest of the group instead of looking at me, I'll basically then kind of make sure I'm concentrating just on him to make sure I've got the shots. Remember, I'm on a tripod or a studio stand, so I can basically get this whole kind of control together. From the biggest of the group, I will then actually start to shrink the group down again before eventually we'll build the group back up again. So when they're in the grouping that they are now, I'll probably actually do 3 different slight changes to this group to give different people different priorities through here. So we've got a great-great-grandchild? Hang on a minute. We got mum and dad, and we've got her mum, we got her daughters, their daughters' kids, whatever it is. It's 4 generations or 5 kids, daughters, mum and dad. You know, we've got 4 generations. Okay, I thought we had a 5th there in there for a minute, but we haven't. So from here, you know, at some stage, the great grandmother is going to be sat on a butt on a chair or on a stool or opposing whatever, but we just go from there. But as you can see, what I usually start with is the group stood up. It's easy to control and just around them. So, you know, whereas I talk about different heads, kind of heights, different eye heights, different angles of the head, initially we're trying to nail that kind of variety, but there's some simple techniques like we're seeing, kicking out a hip, leaning a head to the side, will all change the angles of the heads a little bit more. But what we really don't have in this specific group is a triangle, as far as we don't have the peak of the group. When we start to move dad to the back of the group, yes, and we start to have the taller elements at the back of the group, we have the kind of the shorter or the mid ranges kind of coming down lower, and then the kids out to the side, we naturally create these triangles within our image, and we naturally create these peaks. So from the biggest group, as I said, we do about 3 different kind of setups of the biggest group. Then I'll usually go for the grandparents and the grandkids. So the eldest with the youngest going through. Then I'll go through with the grandparents or great grandparents with the sub family. So in this case, each of the girls with their kids will have a family with great grandma and with their mum and dad as well with it eventually. I'll do sub families as well, and then I'll do the parents and children of their own kind of in the mix, and then I'll do the kids by themselves. I'll even do the parents or the older kids by themselves as well. So quite a lot. I absolutely love big groups because I think of the income that is going to be coming from them. I don't look at the hassle. I don't look at how hard I've got to work. I'm actually looking at going, I've got so many people here, I'm going to knock it out of the park and things really. A couple of questions coming through as far as how do I fix a white background? I've got loads of videos on that on both our YouTube channel and on the Academy, and it's a quick fix to actually go on to the floor with the levels command and basically get that done. You can see there's a mucky white on the floor here because it's a vinyl, it's not been cleaned, so that needs to be lightened up a little bit, but otherwise behind them's good. But there's a quick way to actually be doing these things without kind of subtracting them from the background. Mark, because of the set fixed background, I've always used a main light coming from the left to the right and other space I would light this way. I realize that it doesn't matter, but it's because we read from left to right. Maybe this orientation seems more natural to me anyway, as this factor others think about it. So yeah, okay, my first studio where I was at for 9 years was very low, and the only way for me to get the studio stand out of the way was to fix the light on like a hairdresser's arm that allowed the light to do this up and down, in and out, and so on with it. But that was on my right, and that was just fixed to the wall. So even though I'm working with the light on the left-hand side, the only reason I'm working on that left-hand side, because that's where the plug point was in this case, yeah. And on the opposite side, there wasn't a wall. It was an open area, so I'd have to run an extension lead across it and things really. So again, you know, put the light in whatever position that you want with it and things. Okay, what I expect. So this is important as well. I have to get the client ready to come in to me, whether we're working on location or in studio as well, with the right kind of thing. So I do need to spend time with that client, speaking to them prior to the session. Once they've made the booking, that is really when I get involved. That's when I really start to chat with the client about kind of some ideas, and we talk about them. We talk about their kind of activities, their hobbies, and everything else with it and things. Because by doing that, I can then start to actually identify and create. So for instance, this dad is a chef, but his wife and his daughter as well, they're very, very keen in cooking themselves. And he said, like, when I go home, I don't get a chance. I'm never cooking anyway. So in a studio, we created, you know, the flour and the popcorn and blah, blah, blah. And yes, there's a bit of cleanup time. I did say I allow an extra half an hour, didn't I, between shoots, yeah? But this is the last part of the shot. This is the activity. I've still shot a kind of what I would class as my kind of classic high key image and so on with it. Then I change them into clothes. And that would be their kind of basic hobbies individually. And then we end up with this stylized image that we can kind of come up together. It's a real crescendo to kind of finish off the shoot with and things really. So I'm looking for one look that everyone has the same or similar tone with. That's so it kind of all the color palette can fit, or the contrast can fit. You know, if everybody turned up in black, there's no way I'm going to shoot with a high key background. I'm going to shoot with a darker background for the majority of the first part of the shoot, because otherwise it's just going to exaggerate body shapes, and that's nothing that I want to kind of really exaggerate from the beginning. The two other changes, as I said, looking for a relaxed and informal or an individual, and then actually the fun and informal element is anything related to the interaction, to the accessories as well and things really. So we kind of said, oh, can you bring in some kind of cakes that you might have made the day before, bring some utensils from home and things and blah, blah, blah. So the more we can get the clients to bring in, yeah, they come in with suitcases, but again, it makes that kind of great idea and to actually develop it and things really. Okay, so as far as expressions are concerned, another question there, sorry. Did you ask the clients to wear plain clothes? Did you ask the clients to wear plain clothes? I think I've just answered that for you, if that helps. So it's all through a full discussion. In fact, one of the things I created was a Dressing for Success kind of booklet for the clients to get them prepared for the session. One of the things that I created for our experience group was exactly that as well, so that they could actually share something similar with their clients, whether it was with their images or the experience images and so on with it. So yeah, the more we prepare the client, the more they're going to be bringing in. I much prefer to come in with more changes of clothes than we need, but that's where we need to allow that kind of time. So for me, there's three types of expression: soft and solemn, or silent and solemn, whatever you want to do. Engaging, energetic. So in other words, they're looking at us, big expressions, or, you know, something's going on behind their ears or their eyes, as it were, or kind of going for a timeless image. I would call the image in front of us now an engaging, energetic image. So bit full on and everything else with it. And if you've ever seen the portrait that I use quite a lot of the two girls by themselves, that would be the soft and solemn image that the mum had. So again, as far as the look and the feel is concerned, it's really down to how you feel the session part is going. But a lot of my black and white photography, the portraits, kind of lean more towards a soft and solemn expression than they would the engaging, energetic. The engaging, energetic tends to be more of my colorful images, the high energy images and things really. And in some ways, I suppose the soft and solemn stroke timeless kind of expression is where they all kind of fit together. Remember, stupid don't sell, so don't shoot it. Okay, poking out their tongues, doing kind of things with their hands, whatever it is. You do it to them, kids are doing it to you back. You do it once, you've lost them. It's very hard to actually get it back. In the same way, once you allow a child to run around a studio or a location, you've let them loose. It's like letting a dog off a lead. Yeah, unless they're under verbal command. Yeah, and even my dog, who's good as gold, there's times where she goes brain dead and she's out of there, especially if there's a ball around. But stupid don't sell. Get that in your head. I used to have that as a big sign in the studio. Sorry, not in the studio, in the preparation room, where the photographers kind of actually got ready or kind of brought down their film once they shot and so on with it. But stupid don't sell, so don't shoot it, because you're going to waste film. You're going to waste time. And once you do it, as I said, you might never get that client back again. Specifically, you might not get that young child back again. So avoid it, because they ain't going to buy a 40-inch image of a child doing something stupid, because that's a snapshot, not a portrait that is timeless forever. I'm sure you've all got opinions on that, but anyway, my sign in my location was stupid don't sell, so don't shoot it, and basically don't do it, kind of thing with it. So just before we disappear off to a little bit of a kind of a Photoshop image I've created, all right? And please start getting your questions in if you've got anything that you really want to ask me about this, all right? So posing tips, yeah? Eyes on different levels where possible. By doing that, you naturally kind of change the height and the wave of the actual group. Anybody can draw lines to do with triangles, and anybody can make it up. But in fact, if you look at this image here and you look at the height of the pyramid, and then you kind of try and draw a triangle, you will find there are lines that are visible on the image. You can actually see them, how they're kind of pulling themselves together. So for instance, the girl in the light blue dress at the back on the left hand side, she is the top of the pyramid. From the her left hand side coming down towards this little girl on the edge, there's a natural space and shape. And basically in the same way, the girl in the dark blue dress that sat down, there's an almost invisible line that kind of travels down from this girl in the light blue dress at the back down towards the subject's head, actually in the middle, that is put bang smack in the middle. In the same way, the ginger-haired girl at the back, who sat down, there's a kind of a wide triangle going on in there, but there's also kind of mini triangles within it. And you can start to actually see the jigsaw shapes within it. But the key thing is, to begin with, if you can just try and get the height of the heads on different levels and a slight tilt of the head one way or another, that will start to really improve your posing straight away. And the portrait will start to look a little bit more togetherness, as it were. One of the things, as you can see in this image, I think I've talked about it many times, this photograph, but you can see there's a big cloth background pinned up at the back, and then there's another cloth background, the same size, same color, across the actual props in the foreground, to give me like a Vanity Fair or a kind of a Vogue-y kind of style in a commercial group and things, really. But once more, this big group is lit with one big light, and that's coming in from the top left-hand side, as you can see here, but it's feathered across the whole group to give us that whole look. We try and get the pose to connect with them, especially when they're family. In some way, we want touching, but remember, as I say that, too many hands spoil the picture. You know, like too many cooks spoil the broth. When you remember that too many hands spoil the picture. So hide as many hands as you physically can, and try and avoid where possible to keep them away from the subject's face. Because if you do that, you will naturally kind of bring attention to the face instead of the back of the hand. I mean, we can see two backs of the hands here straight away, and it's both on the left-hand side. The little girl in the white dress sat down on the left-hand side. the back of her hand is pointing straight to me. And all I wanted to do is turn it around to me a little bit more. But whatever it is, she's kind of not doing as I've asked or whatever it is. And then the girl in the light blue dress at the back here, the kind of teal dress, she's kind of let the hand go flat against here. And all we want to do is see the inside between the thumb and the index finger. Whereas the little girl on the seat, we want to see the edge of the small finger. And if you're looking to kind of perfect your hand posing with adults and older clientele, including teens, if you get them to actually just touch, so when you're trying to refine it, and I'm not saying you should do it in the beginning, but when you're trying to perfect hands, try and think about the middle finger touching the thumb, and then it's just relaxed. And then if we see the kind of the side of the hand, it's naturally here, and you get a staircase as well and things really. Eventually, though, we kind of like it's holding a pen kind of pose and things, and that's the perfect way that we can get it. But remember, we want the side of the hands where possible, because it's better than the inside of the hand or the back of the hand by a mile. Okay, so let's quickly whip across into Photoshop. And what I've done here is that same image, okay? I've basically fixed obviously the background and blah, 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 and the foreground with it because it still wasn't big enough. But what I've done is I've then begun to look at each one of these as an individual. And when you only have a few people in a group, it's kind of, when you start to see them as silhouettes, you can start to see how they work together. So remember what I was saying in the beginning is really what you want is a stood up image before a sat down image. If the reason that you're sitting clients down on the floor immediately is because your studio is so low, you need to get them onto the floor, I get it. However, making some kind of posing boxes, just kind of buy a couple of sheets of VDF, draw out some plans that you can create yourself some little posing squares or tubes or kind of, you know, rectangles. And basically they will be your best friend in a studio environment. They're impossible to actually take with you on location, of course. And that's where the likes of Lasterlight and some other manufacturers made some kind of tubs that you could kind of very light and transport and so on. But the biggest problem with them, they're kind of got a cardboard core, which means as soon as they get a little bit damaged, they start to collapse, or they get damp, they start to collapse and so on with it. But basically underneath the likes of the switch that off. Okay, underneath where the girls are, basically we've just got the posing tubs here, and they're just covered over with the cloth itself. So when we start to talk about the three-dimension element of the group, what are we really trying to create? Okay, so from here, if we switch the silhouettes on now and we switch our background on, ignore there's no posing tubs for a minute. But if you kind of start to think about, okay, how else could these people be posed? I'm just going to do something weird and move them all off to the side, okay? A bit like we used to do with the likes of the clock and compass, yeah? Where we're moving images around. So if we were kind of having these images here and we've just got 3 of them, and if we were kind of looking at the pose within here, you've got an easy 3 people pose there no matter what. Yep. And because we've got the 3 different head heights, they're naturally going to work in that way. And there are times, in fact, that you might have to actually put likes of an adult that you just need, you know, another 2 inches up higher. We used to kind of tape up all the yellow pages and kind of wrap them in gaffer tape and then cover them in black cloth and things really. And those used to be kind of stackable for us to actually use and things really. But you can see already that we've got a kind of the beginning of a shot. So remember, I'm not looking at the whole image. I'm looking at as if it was this kind of image here and things. Okay, so you've got a photograph there no matter what. But we want to start with the back. We want to start with the back of the kind of the post no matter what. So in the same way now, if we bring this girl into the foreground, you can see already that now she is going to be too big in the foreground compared to these. So she kind of can't go in this pose. She's too low unless we're bringing in other people in a similar height, as if they're sat on the ground or whatever it is. I know these are sat on posing terms, ignore that. But if we were kind of bringing them all down a little bit more, then you can actually start to work on them. But you've got to watch, this person at the front is not dominating. She does not belong here unless we were kind of doing the composition that we just did a minute ago. In fact, this is the kind of size of client that we need in the foreground compared to this subject bang smack in the middle. We can use this subject to hide a little bit of the body size of this girl. And by doing that, it kind of minimizes together. But what we really need to do is start to actually bring everybody tighter together to end up with the likes of a kind of a 3/4 image within the shot and things. Okay, so just when we start to actually bring everybody together, we can start to actually look at how they sit well or they don't sit well. Hopefully this is making some sense to you. Let's quickly jump into Bridge, and let's go into the sisters. Okay, so let's start here. So this is the kind of the second part of the shoot, the individual element. So as you can see, sister 3 on the left-hand side, whoop, she's the dancer. The girl in the middle is the athlete and the athletic element, and the surfer girl as well, in fact. And then the girl on the right-hand side, she's the artist. So she basically, that's what they kind of do as far as their mix is concerned. It doesn't mean that we can't kind of have a lovely kind of soft energy in the expression with it and things, a little bit more energetic, kind of bringing it in through just the expression itself. Ooh, I was looking for them. And then we can bring the energy high up a little bit more. And now you can see I've added in color into the background, kind of with gels and everything else with it, just to bring it up just that little bit more. Then we were chatting, and they basically refer to themselves as Charlie's Angels. So basically, I had to do this shot no matter what. But of course, it's better off as a silhouette. So just by switching off the key light quickly and just firing the background lights, I can then animate them to get some great images. And whilst we're doing that, of course, then we can keep the background light off and do some shots, then switch the foreground, keep the background lights on here, but switch the foreground off still to actually get some almost kind of silhouette. But when we're doing a silhouette, I need to see the profile of the face. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. When we switch the foreground light back on again, kind of just doing some fun activity going through it. Then we've kind of got the kind of the management kind of through the discussion, kind of I don't know how, I can't remember, whatever it is, but you know, just dealing with it in a different kind of way where they're just kind of making fun and having a bit of a laugh. But you can see all of a sudden I'm completely individualizing the shoot based on what I know and what I've learned about them, and with my notes in advance. Before we kind of ended up doing the classic last, in fact, which is really weird because I usually start with this image. But once more, again, hide the hands as much as we can, just away from each other. We don't want hands appearing over the top of a shoulder. One of my old mentors, Peter, he basically used to kind of refer to it as like cousin it coming over the top of the shoulder. And once you kind of hear these things in photo critiques and print competitions, you can't let them go and everything else with it and things really. So again, you know, kind of having that kind of variety is really what you want to do. Look, I hope that today's been good for you. I hope you've enjoyed our talk photography. There's only a couple of questions here, but get them in if you want some more answered. I suppose in your main example photo of the girls in view in your clothing suggestions, it would have been less distracting. It just one of them wasn't in a red dress. Exactly that. So we were looking at the images, this one here. So it would have been great if she was in a light blue or a gray or whatever it is. But remember, in the likes of Photoshop, if I need to knock that red out, I could. However, if her favorite color is red and they've been asked to bring in their kind of prom dresses, then that's what I'm here to do. I'm to do a photograph and things, really. So if that's the image that you're referring to, absolutely yes, it would be a lot easier to actually do it. I showed a quick shot of a child and two kids on the floor. Can we see it? Bad people. Okay, there you go. I think that's what you're on about. Okay, so this is mum above with her two young kids, and basically I don't need to show all of the images at mum all the time. More often than not, the sooner I can get mum and dad out of the image, they're happier people. They really want just photographs of the kids. So as far as this kind of image is concerned, it's a perfect example being able to actually mix the group in quickly from doing the full length image and so on. I'm absolutely sure though that we've got that's that same family. There we go. If we just bring over there, we just look at those three images. This wasn't planned, sorry. But if you look at those three images, they are very, very similar, but they're slightly different, yes? So in other words, the constants are the mums and the two oldest kids on the left-hand side and the oldest child on the right-hand side. The baby is the one that needs to be shuffled around a little bit more and things. But you can see from going into mum's arms, which really helps the composition of mum here, without a doubt. Putting a baby on hip completely changes body shape no matter what with it, compared to actually without child. But you can see, if I just escape out a minute, if we're not going to, but if I did the same shot with more adults or more younger kids here, we can add them on to the edges of the groups without any trouble at all with it and things. Another question, is there an appetite for portrait photography in light of the increased cost of everything? Yeah, so the good news is that, you know, because of the studios I'm involved in, as far as the experience group is concerned, the figures I know on a month-by-month basis from the bigger studios at least, and I can tell you that the spend money is increasing, not decreasing. It all depends on your avatar of clientele, of course, and, you know, price lists and products and so on with it. But overall, things are not bad. They're really good. In fact, one of our studios had their highest ever month last month, ever. And that would absolutely even trounce a Christmas November trade-in. So that's a really good sign of things. Hand on the shoulder. That's the one I'm on about. Yeah, I missed it. We all make mistakes, but luckily it's not on the next image. But the back of mum's hand is here. She didn't listen to me. Now look how dominant that is. Yeah. Now you can start to see that we're not infallible. We all make mistakes still and things. All right. So again with it. The reflection, in fact, is done in a question about the reflection in this image. This is actually done in the post-production. It's a great way for me to increase the physical portrait size by, you know, in case they say, look, I don't want something as big as that. Well, it's okay, you know, if the reflected image, you're much smaller in the frame, is that what you mean? So I'm looking to actually show these images because of. I just wanted to end off on the kind of the images, what is a family portrait with it. And this is quite a large family. And these are the majority of their shots that we did. So you can see, even though there's some post-production, the light is just on the boy. The light is just on dad. The light is just on mum. The light is just on the girl. The light is just on the girl in the end. So even though I'm adding a slightly different stylization, the reason I'm doing that is so that everyone is an individual image, and they will think of each one as an individual image instead of them being basically just lit a little bit at a time. Then we got the three daughters with their three babies, and individual images with those in exactly the same way. We'd have a spotlight onto the child. Mum's there just as a kind of a prop, but she's involved in the kind of the shoot. Then obviously the great grandma with the grandkids, and then the grandkids with grandma, great grandma in the photograph still, basically just in the background, and then bringing each one of them in turn to the foreground. And pretty much the lighting is exactly the same, and all I'm doing is the animation of the people in the background is different between each shots. I should have said in the posing, I absolutely love a sofa. I used to go through about 3 IKEA clip-hand sofas a year because of all the bouncing on them and the jumping on them, but they're a perfect size for a medium-size studio where you can kind of pose everybody around them and have some great fun. And around a sofa, in fact, I would play kind of run around. You might not think it's the glamorous thing to actually get 3 women laying on their backs with their babies up on their knees, and I agree with you, but it's about the end photograph. I put this one just as a bit of fun for the client because I thought they were super women because they look after all the kids all the time. And just a bit of a laugh. Again, I found some capes on free pick and kind of just added that on and things really. This is the mum and her son, in fact, as well. And so basically I wanted to kind of create it. This kind of imagery, if I could take you back to the 87 is when we opened the first studio up. It wasn't, in fact, it was 86. But 87, 88, I was doing a lot of this kind of montage work in where I was rephotographing things, and kind of, I used to call it scrapbook style, where it kind of had just a little bit of fun and everything else. Obviously, it's very easy to do in the likes of post-production now, but some kind of great fun effects and things really can really create. I used to use overlays on negatives before they print to actually kind of create the effect. Kind of a little bit of reversing around the idea of how it works, etc. But again, some kind of great ideas. And you can see there, you know, the same 2 people in 3 completely different shots and things really. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is keep you know, the individuals. And as a granddad, yeah, any chance for me to have a photograph done with my grandsons and my sons, I'm there. Even though I hate myself in photographs and they hate me. Well, my grandsons like me, in fact, my sons don't. But basically, they will get together for a shot and things really. And the gathering is really the power of the family for me and things really. And it's something that I cherish a lot. And I think when you cherish your family, you understand the world of family photography more and more and things really. Thanks for joining me on my talk photography. I've got a couple of weeks break because I'm off on a bit of a break. But otherwise, we'll see you in a few weeks' time. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.